The graves contained 179 corpses, whose serial numbers indicated that 2/3 were Jews from Poland and the others were Jews from Hungary. After a 21-kilometer, 13-mile march and a brief rest in Chełmsko, the prisoners reached the train station in a state of severe exhaustion. According to one prisoner's testimony, the evacuees were placed aboard a train on 19 February and were still in the cars on 25 February. The exact date of their arrival in Bergen-Belsen is not known. We were not given any food or water for the trip. We were 100 to 120 people crammed into each car, and we were forced to stand. It was freezing on the train. Every freight car had at least 10 to 15 people who died. We pulled into the Dresden train station. There were ditches alongside the tracks, and the dead bodies were dumped overboard into the ditches straight from the rail cars. They even removed the lousy pajamas from the dead before dumping the bodies. Dresden is very close to the Czechoslovakian border. When we passed through one Czech town, some people tried to offer us loaves of bread by throwing them into the rail cars. They knew that evacuations were taking place. The SS wouldn't allow them to do this. They threatened these nice people by telling them that they would be shot if they continued, and we hadn't had anything to eat in days. In some other towns we passed through, open cars laden with frozen prisoners. People were not upset with what they saw. They stood and stared apathetically. It did not occur to them to offer food and assistance. When the train arrived in Bergen-Belsen, I was placed in the barracks with most of the able-bodied men who had survived the terrible conditions. We were given a very meager ration upon our arrival. In the distance, we could hear bombing in and around the city of Hannover, 28.5 miles away. We spent 2 nights in Bergen-Belsen before being loaded onto flatbed trucks. Each crowded truck had 2 SS officers inside. The train station at Hannover had been almost completely destroyed by heavy bombing the day before. Many other buildings and homes in the area were destroyed as well. We were taken to Hildesheim, 52 miles away. In March 1945, there was a satellite of the Neuengamme concentration camp system in Hildesheim. The Neuengamme system had more than 85 satellite camps, which were established all over northern Germany for construction projects and armament production. The prisoners had to do hard labor for the war economy. Living and working conditions were murderous. Altogether, at least 42,900 people died in the Neuengamme main camp and satellite camps, or died on death marches when the camps were evacuated. The Hildesheim camp held around 500 Jewish prisoners. These prisoners carried out railway work for the Hannover Regional Railway Office and rebuilt the city's freight yard, which had been severely damaged by Allied bombs. Most of the prisoners were from Hungary. The men were housed in the local civic hall. The commanders of the satellite camp were SS officers who were responsible for the camp's administration, while the prisoners were guarded during work by members of the Volkssturm, Nazi militia. We were stationed at the railway building and had the task of rebuilding the railway. The work was very difficult, but at least we were given some food to sustain us. Every night we slept at the Civic Theater Hall. One morning as we left the hall, there were many who were too sick to work and had to be left behind. When we returned later that day, we saw that the entire building had been destroyed by bombs. I saw arms and legs and all kinds of body parts all over the place amongst the rubble. I was so lucky to have been able to work that day. Now there was no place to sleep, so they took us to the Leine River, where we tried to sleep on the roadside beside the water. We were freezing in only our striped pajamas. On March 22, 1945, another building housing prisoners was destroyed by Allied bombs, and the freight yard was severely damaged again as well. The SS, under threat, planned to evacuate the work camp and leave for the Hannover Alum satellite camp, and then from there to Bergen-Belsen. The Hannover work camp was also part of the Neuengamme system and was a forced labor camp for a large industrial company. I was one of the 340 prisoners who arrived in Hannover from the Hildesheim work camp on March 25, 1945. We joined the 750 men who were still alive there. Evacuation of Hannover began on April 6, 1945, with 600 prisoners being marched to Bergen-Belsen. Those 250 prisoners who were not well enough to march were left behind.